Hello guys, so I'll be talking about Phillips curve, and since Larry already has talked about the short run Phillips curve, I'll just be focusing on the long run Phillips curve. So here on the y-axis we have inflation, and on the x-axis we have unemployment. Okay, that's exciting. And as we all know that the short run Phillips curve is going downwards, so it means that unemployment has an inversely proportional relationship to inflation. So as inflation decreases, unemployment will increase. So I'm just going to call this the short run Phillips curve, SRPC. Right. And where do you find long run Phillips curve? Long run Phillips curve. Let me find the color. As you know that in aggregate supply, that long run is vertical in a perfect output economy with perfect output and low and full employment rate. So this will be the LRA long run Phillips curve, and I'm gonna call this long run Phillips curve L. I can just change it later. LRPC. Sorry, LRPC right here, and there's actually three faces, 3 points on this graph that we can draw out. So first we have a point that's pretty obvious. Let me give you a different color. A point that's obvious is right here. This is where the economy is at its full employment. And I'm going to call this point, this is equilibrium, and this is where an economy have full employment. But the thing that you have to remember that is that the full employment doesn't mean there's no unemployment, because there's always frictional and structural unemployment. So this will between full employment means that it will have 4% to 6% unemployment. So in this case, we can take the middle, which is 5% unemployment. And then at this point we have a recession. The economy is at recession, and this is where we have a high unemployment rate but low inflation. High unemployment, high UP, but low inflation. So this is a deflationary gap. We can say that it's a deflationary gap. So right here. And then we have another point on the graph, which is here, where you have a high inflation. But the good thing is inflation, but you have low unemployment. So there you go, 3 points on the graph. When the economy's work is at its full employment with 5% unemployment with best output, and the economy is at a high unemployment but low inflationary, that's a good thing. Or is it high inflation but low unemployment? So here we have the shift of Phillips curve, and the easiest way to find out this is by comparing this with a supply curve. And so first we have a long run LRS, and this is a long run short run aggregate supply and the short run aggregate demand. So in the beginning we have where in the equilibrium where the aggregate supply and aggregate demand will work at the long run aggregate supply. But here, as it shifts to point, okay, let's call this point A, and let's call this point B. As it shifts to point B, this will result in the decrease in output, because it shifts this way. Because it's shifted this way, and then it would have the increase in price because the quantity, the aggregate supply goes upwards and the price line goes outwards. The demand will go down, but supply will go down as well. And the LRAS will shift to the and the point here that we will call this point A will shift to point B, and point B can also be found. Point B, this point can also be found in this graph, in this Phillips curve graph. So how do we find out point B? In Phillips curve, I forgot to put curve. This is called long curve. So yes, we can find out that here in this graph we have the aggregate supply shift to the left to point B and the higher price below output. So this means that it has more inflation because as price increases and more unemployment. So we can draw on the graph more inflation and more unemployment. So this means that the Phillips curve shift to the right. The figure shift to the right. So how do we find out the shifting Phillips curve? So as we know that the aggregate supply shift to the left to point B, it means that there's high price level below output. And so in the Phillips curve, we'll know that high price level means a higher inflation and more unemployment. And more unemployment. So it will probably look like this. And point B, A was supposed to be here, equilibrium, but it will shift to point B in this direction, means that there is more unemployment and the inflationary gap goes up. So we can say that as the LRAS graph, if the supply graph shift to the left, supply graph shift to the left, the Phillips curve will shift, the short run Phillips curve will shift to the right on the long run, because on the long run will have full employment, so you shift to the right. Let's make the rule a little bit clearer for you. So here we have the aggregate demand, aggregate demand is right. And what happens when aggregate demand shifts? When aggregate demand shifts to the right, means there will be a movement along the SRPC curve. And so the first rule that we have to know is that AD, you better write this down, will have a movement along the SRPC. And the second rule is the final rule that you have to know, is that when there is a shift in the aggregate supply, this is AS. So I'll use a different color so you can look at it better. When there's a shift in the short run aggregate supply from here to here to here, this is the shift. They will cause, if it's shifting to the right, then you shift to the left. But if it's shifting to the left, it will shift to the right, like we said. So it will go here, here, or here, depending on the direction it's shifting. So if you have the aggregate supply shifts, it will have a shift in the SRPC along the long run Phillips curve. So the second rule that we have to draw here is that as aggregate supply shifts, it will cause a shift in the SRPC along the LRPC. So very important rule and very easy to remember. Basically, opposite. This is opposite. Just have to remember this rule. So guys, here's an interesting thing about the long run Phillips curve. So we'll look at the long run aggregate supply shift. So first, we all know that we have started here at point B where it's working at full employment with okay price, decent price, and equilibrium supply, equilibrium demand. But what happens is we increase the output. As we increase the output, this means that we will have probably increase the output by improving the quality of workers by providing them education. So we will have an increase in aggregate demand with an increase in the aggregate supply. Oh, I forgot to label the graphs, but I will tell you this is AD1. So you will move here, but however, we cannot always support the high output, and we eventually have to decrease the output and by changing the supply so that it will return to point C right here. So it will move from, okay, so I'm just going to draw the directions right here. So LRS will increase the output to the new equilibrium with the new aggregate demand with the okay price but higher supply, but then we'll go back to point C where they're back to full employment but with a higher price. And here you notice this. What's this? This is inflation. You notice the price is right here, but what happens here is that it will have point, let's call this point A in the originator, but as it increases, we will notice with a lower unemployment rate, sorry, this is unemployment, the unemployment, with the lower unemployment rate and the increase in inflation, wait, this and this, oh, similar, it's point B, so you will go here. The SRPC curve will shift the point along the curve here as demand increases as demand moves to the right, and the SRPC will move to the left as we mentioned earlier. But what happens when the aggregate supply, oh, this is AS by the way, when aggregate supply shift to the left, when aggregate supply shift to the right, remember the opposite, the aggregate supply would now, the short run Phillips curve will now shift to the right. Let me just change to a better color. Yeah, shift to the right. Sorry. We'll just sorry. Okay, we'll just shift to the right here with point C. I'm going to call that point C. Wait, point C isn't the same as this one. Yes, it's the same as this one. Look, with the same output, with the same number of UN unemployment, the price increases means that there's an inflation going on right here, and the short run Phillips curve therefore will have to shift to the right because the short run aggregate supply curve is shifting to the left. So point A, point B, point C. So here we have an inflationary gap along the long run Phillips curve because of the shift from the short run Phillips curve from the point A direction to point B direction with a lower unemployment, a greater output, a greater price. But we cannot support that greater output. This is the thing, we cannot support the greater output because it's too much for us. So we have to go back to point C with the same unemployment rate in the beginning, but a higher price, and that results in inflation.